incredible getting to meet so many passionate people for animation. You all are blowing my minds. That said, I think I made a confession. I need to make a confession for you guys. I can't draw, like at all. Nor can I animate. I can't draw or animate. Don't ask me to draw a picture of BoJack Horseman. That will be an insult to the craft. Also, I don't know Spanish very well. I'm so sorry. I know the snippets that I learned in school. Hola, ¿cómo está? ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Which has not been helpful for me here. People keep pointing me to the library. So what am I doing here? Oh my God, why am I here? I promise you we'll get to the bottom of this. I'm a writer, and I am a part of animation because I have the lucky job of helping create the television scripts in which artists and actors and producers and a whole slew of talented people get to take and bring to life through animation. It is a privilege and a dream come true to say that I wrote on the Emmy-nominated BoJack Horseman. Actually, when I flew in here, I found out I was nominated for an Annie Award for my writing on the show, so that was pretty exciting. And also, Vanity Fair just called it the best television show of the decade, so pretty cool show. Vanity Fair is high class. As many of you may or may not know, BoJack Horseman is in its final season, with the final episodes set to premiere in January. It was quite a journey getting to write on that show, and I'm excited to tell you guys all about that journey today. Hopefully hearing about how I got the gig and how the BoJack Horseman writer's room operated will give you some insight into some steps you may want to take when you're creating your own animated work. Or like, not, I don't know, like maybe you're just here for some hot BoJack Horseman gossip. Like, what's Will Arnett like? I'll tell you. He's tall. But seriously, at the core of any good piece of animation, or really any good piece of art, is just a really, really good story, right? And I have a lot of pride in the stories that I was able to help tell on BoJack Horseman. But again, I'm like really sorry I can't draw. Like, that's my bad. I'm so sorry. Okay, so my background. Like I said, my name is Alison Tafel. I wrote on seasons 4, 5, and 6 of BoJack Horseman. I was part of a group of writers who all worked together to create the scripts for the show. I'll explain more about that process in a few minutes, but the specific episodes that say written by Alison Tafel were season 4, episode 6, Stupid Piece of Shit. My mom loves that title, by the way. Season 5, episode 7, Interior Sub, or Int Sub, or as fans call it, Bobo the Angsty Zebra. And then season 6, episode 3, this one behind me, Feel Good Story, and this is the one that's nominated for the Annie Award. And I wrote one more that's going to be in the second half of the final season. I can't say the title quite yet, but you guys, it's going to be really good. Get excited. I really am. So before I landed in the adult animated comedy space, I was working in live action children's television as a writer's assistant. And before that, I was a very, very underpaid production assistant for an American sitcom. And before that, I was a CBS page, which meant I sat audience members in their seat for The Price is Right. And before that, I performed improvisation comedy and sketch comedy at night and was a nanny by day. That's right, someone trusted me with their kids. Yikes. I tell you this because I think it's really important to show you that there's really no correct path into making it in entertainment. There's no certain, for sure method to success, and everyone's story is different, which is pretty great if you ask me, because can you imagine if we were all the same? That would really suck, boo. I also tell you this because I think it's important to point out that this business that we're all choosing to be involved in, animation, film, television, showbiz in general, is very hard. And hard is kind of an understatement. It's very, very hard. It's stupid hard. It's crazy hard. You're all crazy, is what I'm saying. So in the times that you feel defeated or stressed or lonely, I really hope it's helpful for you guys to know that I am too. All the time, like right now. But that's part of our story, isn't it? And like I said, the best part of art is the story that we get to tell with it. But just, you're allowed to have bad days too. Okay? It's like my dad always tells me, tough times don't last, tough people do. So I grew up in a small town in Colorado, and growing up, I loved the theater. I also loved making people laugh, and I knew it was my destiny to work in comedy in some capacity. Did I know I was going to land in adult animation? No, but I knew I really wanted to do something important in the field of comedy, and I have loved where I've landed. But just a side note, I had no idea that pursuing a career in entertainment was a weird thing for a woman to do. I didn't know that writing and comedy and improv and animation were all male-dominated fields. But then I grew up and I learned that every field is a male-dominated field. So, especially with television, I have become quite used to being one of the few, if not only, women in the room. And I think we can all agree that that needs to change. So that's why I keep at it. That's what gets me motivated every day. That's what made me want to come down here. Because I know if I have a seat at the table, then eventually I'll be able to help other women have a seat at the table too. And that is very important and should be a priority for everybody working in this business. Yeah! Gave me a chance to open my water bottle. Thank you. More applause, please. So I'm proud to say that the creator of BoJack Horseman, Raphael Bob Waxberg, made sure his writer's room was balanced in gender. We always had 4 women and 4 men working together, 8 people total. That's not a common practice in Hollywood. Just 2 years before working on BoJack, I was an assistant to a man who only had male writers on his writing staff. And because I'm in Argentina and not in Hollywood at the moment, I can sit here and loudly say, that guy sucked. He was the worst. Don't be that guy. He's not working anymore. Anyway, back to my story. I grew up in Colorado. I went to Arizona State University, and I got my degree in theater, which is really practical. It's a really good degree. You can do so much with theater, like quote Shakespeare sometimes. Then I moved to Chicago, where I learned the art of sketch comedy and improvisation. For those of you who are not familiar with improvisational comedy, it's a form of theater where comic actors get up on stage and make up comedy scenes on the spot. I've always believed that if you can get really good at improv, you can be really good at writing comedy, because improv teaches you how to quickly target the most hilarious and compelling idea on the fly. It really distills the funny. I studied at the very famous Second City Theater in Chicago. It's a place in the US that's known for training the funniest, coolest, hippest comedians, and then also me. And then I turned my sights to Los Angeles and the land of television. I've always really loved writing, but to be honest, when I moved to LA, I had no idea how to write for television, much less for animation. I wasn't what you would call like a savant. I wasn't a natural. I didn't just take a pen to a paper and execute a flawless script with a beginning, middle, and end. I didn't know about act structure or character development or script formatting or even like correct font size. Basically, in order to write for television, I just had a ton of work I had to do. One thing that improvisation taught me was how to find and to follow the funny. Improv has a lot of basic principles that are extremely relevant to script writing. There's a principle called yes and. Has anyone ever heard of yes and? Well, it's an idea where if you present an idea on stage or an idea with writers or an idea with creative people, you don't deny it immediately. You don't say no. You instead support it and add to it. For example, if someone in the writer's room says, what if in this episode BoJack Horseman looks like a zebra? It's not helpful to say, no, that's a bad idea. That stops creativity in its tracks. Instead, it's more fun to be like, yeah, and if BoJack is a zebra, And in that case, maybe Diane can be Princess Diana. And suddenly you have people going, oh yeah, what if we get even weirder with our other characters and have Todd be Emperor Fingerface and Princess Carolyn be a tangled fog of pulsating yearning in the shape of a woman? That is the premise of my episode, Interior Sub, and that is yes and in all its glory. Yes and opens things up. It makes creative possibilities limitless. It makes telling a story fun and not stressful. If you're writing an animated script and are like really stuck, I really highly recommend just going back to the basic principles of yes and just writing that dumb idea and keep adding to it. Another principle that improv taught me was the idea of today is the day. Have you guys heard of today is the day? So when you're on stage making up a comedy scene, it's always better to make whatever you're doing very important. Like today is the day something different or wonderful or scary or heroic or bizarre is going to happen. For example, it's not very interesting to see Diane in her boring LA apartment eating grilled cheese. Today is the day that Diane discovers a new city. Today is the day that Diane goes to Chicago. And today is the day that Diane realizes she is in love with her coworker Guy. If you have an interesting character, make sure that at the start of your story, they are on a today is the day journey. Why see BoJack sitting by his pool doing nothing when he could be grabbing his mother's toy doll and throwing it over the deck of his house into his neighbor's backyard? That's much more fun. So armed with my improv knowledge, yes and, today's the day, and not to mention all the other like small comedy staples like Rule of Three. Have you heard of Rule of Three? It's basically where when you repeat a joke or an image, you say it 3 times. Don't know why. 3 is just the funniest number. It's like the word hornswoggle. It's just funny. Hornswoggle. So 2 is too little, 4 is too much. Hornswoggle. And callbacks are really important in improv as well as on a show. Have you guys heard of callbacks? Callbacks is when you recall an earlier joke you said and you just repeat it because for some reason it's really, really impressive to show that you remember things. Like, okay guys, I see you guys are insisting, so I'm just gonna go ahead and show you. I really can't draw BoJack Horseman. That's as good as it's gonna get. I have a front angle. I think that might be a little bit better. So that's pretty good. Also his side, I don't want to talk about what I think his nose looks like right here. Maybe I'll sign those and you guys can frame it in your house and say, someone who couldn't draw BoJack drew this drawing. Armed with my improv knowledge, I embarked on learning how to write a television script. Perhaps many of you guys already know about these principles of improv, and I'm just like really boring you right now, but for those who don't, I just highly recommend adding it to your repertoire as a way of creating your art whenever you're stuck. And now back to my background. I wish I could tell you that I took like a bunch of classes and got certified in the arts of writing television, but that's not true. I just became a TV writer by watching a shit ton of TV. Yeah, I just justified being a couch potato as lessons. I devoured every sitcom. I mean, essentially what I did is I went to old episodes of sitcoms and shows that I absolutely love, and I simply got a piece of paper and a pencil, and I wrote down everything that was happening, every single scene, everything. I was starting to be a TV scientist. I was dissecting every single episode and noticing patterns and noticing trends. I noticed that all half-hour shows seem to be divided into 3 sections, or rather acts. And right before a commercial break, something really exciting happens, and then we go to commercial. I noticed that every character in an episode had a clear objective of what they wanted to accomplish. Today was the day they were accomplishing something. I noticed that there would be a main story with main characters that took up the majority of the episode, and then I noticed there'd be a smaller story with smaller characters being a little part of the episode, an A story and a B story. Again, I recognize that I might be telling you something that you all know, but you have to know, at the time when I was starting out as a writer, this blew my mind. Like, it was so exciting because once I saw that there was like a formula for creating TV scripts, it took away the intimidation of writing one myself. To this day, when I get stuck on story ideas, I just go back to the basics. I remember when I was young and sitting in front of the TV with my pad and paper and going, oh my God, that's an A story. Oh my God, that's a B story. That's a callback. It always makes creating a story way less daunting and thus way more fun. You're going to hear me say fun a lot because I think sometimes we get so bogged down in our craft that we forget that what we're doing is voluntary and fun. After absorbing all of my favorite TV shows and studiously writing what I saw, I read all the scripts that I could get my hands on. I just Googled it. Not a huge science. I just started looking for scripts, legitimate scripts from TV shows, and I would read the script as I was watching the TV show to see how that script translated to screen. Like I said, it's not like a science, just what I did. And when people are like, how'd you do it? I'm like, I just watch TV, guys. And then finally, after doing that for a long time, I was ready to write my very own pilot. And you guys, I have to say, my very first script was terrible. It was so bad. It was really campy. It was overthought. It was like, ugh, it was really bad, you guys. But I did it. I wrote a script. It had a cold open. It had 3 acts. It had characters with objectives. In the case of my first ever pilot, today was the day the main character's dad died. So hilarious. I told you it was terrible, but the important thing was it was something. This card is called Everything is Bad. That's the name of this card I'm going to read. I meet young writers all the time who ask me for advice. And my first advice to them is always this: finish what you start. If you want to be a writer, write something. Don't start to write something. Write something and finish it. It will really be bad. It'll be bad. It'll be very, very bad. Art, when you start doing it, is bad. There is no exception to this rule. The only way it gets good is if you keep at it. As a writer, I had to write a bad script before I could write a good one. I had to write actually a lot of bad scripts before I could write a good one. So I'm going to tell you, if you want to draw or animate or write, suck it up and do your first bad thing. If you complete it, you will already be ahead of all aspirational people who claim that they will start their creative passion someday. And to use a great comedy writing tool, start looking at things as today is the day. Today is the day that I'm going to write my very first pilot that's going to be very bad. So I wrote a shitty pilot, nailed it, done, awesome, high five. Then I wrote another thing, and I wrote another thing, and at this time, professionally, I was living in Los Angeles. I was seating people on the game show The Price is Right, also America's Got Talent, also Dancing with the Stars. And I had to sit backstage and wait for commercial breaks to escort people to the bathroom. It was a very glamorous job. As I was doing that, I was meeting people in the industry who were writers and producers and comedians and friends. And I was politely asking them to read my writing and give me feedback. Getting feedback and revising my work was the only way that I got better. Okay, so now we're getting into networking, right? I think everybody is here for that exact purpose, correct? Here are a few rules, at least in the United States in the industry, when you are looking around and wanting to get feedback on your work. Because there are kind of weird rules to this, you know what I mean? Number 1, don't approach someone on social media who you have never met before and ask them to look at your portfolio or read your writing. It's so creepy. Please don't do that. I'm not saying you're not allowed to meet people online. You meet tons of people online, but instead what you want to do is ask for advice for people who you've had a chance to get coffee with, to get to know, maybe have an email correspondence so you know about each other. Because sending an email that says, hey, I got your email from a friend of a friend of a friend. Will you read my writing right now? It doesn't count. You are developing a relationship, not getting a professional to adhere to a list of your demands. How do you meet these people? Good job. At conferences, or online forums, or meetups, or maybe you get a assistant low-paying job in the industry. I'm not saying that you can't approach people with your ideas and you can't be passionate about your ideas. It's important to have drive. There's just a difference. In America, we say being hungry and being thirsty. So how do you say it here? I would say there's a difference between being passionate and being annoying. Hey, will you read my work? Will you read my work? Will you read my work? It's like, I don't know. So it's like dating. Start slow. Keep it slow. Keep them wanting more. Ask, but don't expect feedback. In the early days, there were plenty of professionals that I met that just straight up said no to reading my work. Maybe because they didn't have the time, or maybe because they hated my face, I don't know. But you know what, that was okay. Some people said they'd read my work, and then they would never get back to me, and that was okay too, because it's about finding that balance between having that drive and ambition. Because at some point, you will meet people who do give you feedback. You just have to keep at it politely and confidently. 4, if you give people if someone gives you notes, don't argue with the notes. Say thank you. Chances are they're right. Or if they're super wrong, just say thank you, and then don't take the note. Just only take the notes that you want. Clarifying why your writing is better than what they're saying defeats the whole purpose of getting feedback. What makes you a better writer is understanding that people see the world differently than you. And maybe the thing you're trying to convey comes across if it's through their own point of view. Does that make sense? So those are my kind of basic rules with networking. As I worked my way into becoming a production assistant, where my main role on the sitcom was printing scripts and making coffee, I slowly created relationships with some of the sitcom writers who, at the end of the season, when I had worked really hard for them, working 12 hours a day, going on runs for them, being part of everything, smiling so much, they were nice enough to say that they would read my writing and give me notes. And they did it because the same people did the same for them. The time period when I was an assistant is when I evolved most as a writer. I had some very, very successful people give me notes on what now I look at as my most embarrassing scripts. like scripts that I cannot believe I gave to professional people. But I never argued with their notes, and I took what I liked from that feedback, and eventually my next story became a really, really good script. So everyone's journey is a little different, right? I had many years where I was really poor and far away from home, and there were times that I really thought about quitting. And if I ever got to a point where, honestly, I was more miserable than I was happy with trying to be a writer, I would have, and that would be okay. But one thing seems to be consistent with all success stories. Most people who have made it have set themselves up for what I call maximum luck. Let me explain. The year 2016 was my luckiest year as a writer. I mean, it wasn't a great year for America. We were about to elect a giant orange potato as our president. I am so sorry. But for some reason, 2016 was a year that a lot of positive things came my way. So when I say set yourself up for maximum luck, I mean that you never really know when something you do, a piece of writing, a piece of animation, a piece of art, when something you create will take off for you. And I mean, when I say that, I really mean like it could be something that you did a long, long time ago that suddenly years later takes off for you. All you can do is be ready for it when it happens. That's why I say write something and finish it. Have it ready. And as someone who is working as an assistant, I say be nice. Ask for feedback. Be ready. Enjoy what you can on the job. Remember to be a fan of the art that you're pursuing. A seed you planted years ago could come back and be your big break. So you never know. Just always try to be ready for that luck. So in 2016, I had just a ton of scripts galore. If anyone was going to ask to read something of mine, I was ready. I was ready to email it to them. I'd also been promoted from production assistant to a writer's assistant. So now I was getting a chance to be in a writer's room and see how a writer's room functioned on a TV show. I wasn't a writer, I was taking notes for writers, but I was there. I was also just really trying to be happy along the way and not get too bogged down with all the difficulties of this business. But instead focus on the things in the business that made me happy, that made me smile, that made me laugh, things that I could control. The things that I couldn't control, the occasional sexism, the occasional disrespect, the low, low pay. I mean, yes, that all pissed me off. So you know what I did? I cataloged it, knowing someday I could change that. Knowing someday I could speak at a conference like this one and say, men are jerks, women rule, suck it! In 2016, I applied for a fellowship with NBC Universal. I didn't think it was my best submission, to be honest. I sort of found the fellowship online last minute, and there was a few days away from deadline, but I submitted anyways. You miss out by never submitting. And miraculously, this thing that I just threw together because I was so ready to just throw something together and submit, I got the fellowship. I was one of 6 selected out of 1,100 applicants. Suddenly, I got to go to New York for a fun weekend, and most importantly, I got my name on an NBC website saying I was a good writer. At the same time, I had given a sample of my writing to an old colleague from a sitcom I was a production assistant on years before, and now years later, he saw my picture on a website, went, "Oh, do I have a script of hers?" and read my script. And then he called me and he said, "Hey, your script is good." And I'm like, "I know. I gave it 2 years ago, Joe." So then he submitted that script to his manager, and his manager happened to be looking for new clients. That's all luck, right? But I was so prepared for it. I had been essentially building this my whole life. So I get slightly annoyed when people go, "You're so lucky." I'm like, yes. We all are lucky if you make it, but you can't discount the hard work that it takes and the patience and all the sucky times that you're going to go through while doing it. So the fact that all of this happened to me at once, the NBC fellowship, getting a manager, and then that manager introduced me to an agent, this all happened in the span of a month. That's very lucky, but it's my timing and my setting up for maximum luck that got me there. And then this is where it gets even more wonky and lucky. When I first met my agent and manager for the official Alison Tafel career path meeting, I looked them dead in the eyes and said, "My favorite show on television is BoJack Horseman." And BoJack was looking for new writers, so my agent submitted me for consideration. So my first ever job interview as a professional writer was on my favorite show of television. And as luck would have it, or is it luck? I don't know. I happen to have a perfect writing sample that was in the exact tone and style of the show. It fit the tone and humor of BoJack really, really well. And I got an interview. And I prepared for the interview by rewatching the entire series overnight and having ideas ready for the upcoming season. I managed not to completely freak out when I met Raphael Bob Waxberg and the show's producers. And a week later, I got the job. From April to August of 2016, my life completely changed, and that is my becoming a writer story. So a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between writing on live action television shows versus writing on animation? And honestly, from my experience on BoJack, it's really not much different. If anything, writing for animation is just a lot more fun because there are so many more ways that you can tell a story that is otherwise limited in the real world, right? My favorite thing about writing on BoJack was how Raphael approached each episode. He'd always sit down at this really long table and put his feet up and lean back in his chair and go, "Okay, so what is this episode about?" He didn't mean like what happens in the episode. He meant, what are the themes and the feelings that we're trying to evoke in this episode? Yes, Diane's in Chicago now, but like, what is this episode about? Yes, BoJack is calling himself a stupid piece of shit, but like, what is this episode about? It made each episode feel like it was an event. And because it was animated, we had an endless supply of tools to creatively tell a story that was unique and captivating. So, what was it really like in the BoJack Horseman writer's room? Okay, I'll tell you. We worked Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. When I tell other television writers in Hollywood that schedule, they are usually gobsmacked. Usually there's a lot of late nights and a lot of like overnight writing, but we didn't do that. Our boss really believed that the more we had a work-life balance, the more stories we would be able to bring to the table. You have to have a life to write about life, right? It's so hard because we all just kind of want to observe it, right? But we gotta live it. It's helpful that animation doesn't tend to have night shoots, though, so that's also why we didn't have really late nights. It's also, though, proof to me that good TV can be made during normal business hours. Don't let people make you feel like you have to be dying in order to make good TV. We all respected each other and had a room agreement to be courteous and open-minded to each other's ideas. When coming up with a story, it's really important to feel comfortable. That way we can be vulnerable and honest about our personal life experiences. And that only comes when you trust the people that you're working with. This, again, is really uncommon in Hollywood. It's a dynamic that I'm hoping is changing in the television industry. From previous shows that I worked on, there tended to be an air of competition and occasional disrespect toward writers. With BoJack, I'm so thankful that that wasn't the case. There were 8 of us, all trying to achieve the same goal: make great television. I mean, sure, did we drive each other crazy sometimes because Nick always picked his teeth? Yeah, absolutely. But our room really genuinely liked each other and liked being around each other. We were all smart and driven, and we all just really loved this talking horse show. So there is a hierarchy in a writer's room, in groups. And to me, the hierarchy seems intimidating, but I always loved it, because then it meant that's not all on one person, and especially as a new writer, it's not all on you to take over the room. It's really important, if you ever get a chance to be in a writer's room as a first-time writer, that you don't need to prove and talk so much and prove that you are the best, smartest person in the room, that you are beating everybody in the room. It's more important to be quiet and take it in and learn what everyone's strengths is, and only pitch when you absolutely have a good idea. I wish someone told me that when I started writing. I was so nervous, I was like, and I talked so much. Also, there's a hierarchy because there are people who have more experience than you, and so they get paid more than you. So anytime I couldn't really think of a way to solve a problem, I always remembered that they get paid more to solve the problem that I can't solve. So what did our days look like? Well, we sat in a big room with a big table, surrounded by whiteboards, drank a lot of coffee, we ate a lot of snacks. Lunch was always ordered and delivered us because we're spoiled. And in the case of BoJack, we had an endless stack of coloring books, fidget toys, and Legos. We had a toy bin, you guys. I was a really good colorer. It was just something for us to do to keep our hands occupied as we were brainstorming. Sometimes we would spend a whole day talking about one scene of an episode, and other days we would get off topic and talk about our weekends, or our favorite scene from Back to the Future, which is when Michael J. Fox plays the guitar, by the way. That is the best scene in Back to the Future. And weirdly, sometimes that off-topic stuff would find itself in the script. I remember in my second episode, for instance, everyone was snacking and talking about string cheese so much that the string cheese became a vital part of the B story. Emperor Fingerface accused Tangle Fog of stealing his string cheese because someone stole my string cheese, and I know who it was. The beginning of the room always looked at the whole season as a whole. Again, taking a look at the major stories that we wanted to tell with our main characters and using the whiteboard to map out where these very big things were going to happen. So in season 4, for example, we knew that we wanted BoJack's mother to eventually move in with him. And we also knew we wanted to unravel the mystery of our new character, Hollyhock. Season 5, we knew we wanted BoJack to eventually go to rehab, and we knew that Diane and Mr. Peanut Butter would be heading toward divorce. After taking a few weeks to nail down these major arcs, we call it blue skying it, we would start to write our first episode and begin to write these individual episodes. Raphael assigns a writer for an episode, and we get to assisting that writer in what we call breaking it. Breaking it meaning figuring out what exactly specifically happens. This is where the BoJack Writers Room was wonderful and unique. When it was your episode, you really felt like it was yours. Some writers' rooms kind of arbitrarily put a name on a script, and yet they all write it together. Sometimes they break apart an episode and go, this person write one scene, this person write another scene, and we bring it together. We call it Frankensteining a script. BoJack didn't do that, thank God. I hate Frankenstein scripts. Because with BoJack, if your name was on the script, you were writing the script. So who's in charge when that happens? Well, if the dynamic of the room was as wonderful as the BoJack writer's room, it was easy. In my first episode, for instance, I was just the staff writer, and it was my first time ever writing a full script on a TV show. So I reached out to one of the writers with more experience and asked her to assist me in guiding the room so that we can make it the best episode we could. She helped me discuss areas that I was interested in. She helped give me tips on how to receive feedback from everybody. And she also told everyone when to go to the bathroom. It was really helpful to have the authority figure go, pee break. And she let me write on the whiteboard, which is something that's weirdly intimidating in a writer's room. Side note, my first episode of BoJack was really terrifying for me to write. Even in good hands, when I eventually went home to write my script, I had a cry to my boyfriend, and I said I couldn't eat, and I was totally stressed out that I was not good enough. The truth is, I was good enough. And it turned out great in the end. Stupid Piece of Shit is an episode that I'm unbelievably proud of. But I just want to tell everybody this because I want to be transparent. Even in the best circumstances, this career is intimidating and scary. And as I've said before, it's very, very, very hard. And I just don't want to give the impression that everything is this lucky, delightful fairy tale all the time. The one benefit about my first episode of BoJack was that it was called Stupid Piece of Shit. And it was all about the negative voices in BoJack's head telling him that he's a stupid piece of shit. So all of the negative voices in my head really were working well for me for that episode. I took advantage of that. A lot of people go, how did you know how to say all those mean things? And I'm like, I don't know, it's crazy. So back to writing on BoJack. Typically, the person writing the episode breaks the story on the whiteboard. We write down beats. We write down directions. After a lot of sculpting, we bring Raphael in the room who does his, what is the episode about? And to me, I always interpret that to also mean, how can we make this episode interesting? So I'm going to just talk about my episodes for a bit because I want to. So Stupid Piece of Shit. To me, that episode is about how we go about combating the negative voices in our head and how sometimes the negative voices win. And an interesting way to show that to me was by animating BoJack's negative internal monologue in a different, more juvenile style. In Interior Sub, to me, that episode was about the stories we choose to tell other people and how we tell those stories. So with this theme in mind, I loved the idea that this episode was being told from Diane's therapist's point of view, this complete outsider who sees our main characters very differently than how they see themselves. In Feel Good Story, oh yeah, so that's, yeah, here we go, there's Interior Sub. In Feel Good Story, I felt the episode was really about how hard it is to feel good sometimes, even when you have every reason to feel good. So we put one of our most self-loathing characters, Diane, in a romantic comedy. Yep, I literally made Diane meet a guy. I named him Guy. And that guy confesses his love for her on a snowy train platform, just like the movies. And yet she cannot feel good. So using that really well-known trope allowed us to dive into Diane's psyche. So we bullet point and map out our episodes on the board. We pitch it to Raphael. Once he approves it, we get to go home and write an outline on our own. Then the rest of the writer's room moves on to the next episode. Then you turn in your outline. The writers read it. You sit around a table and get notes. Then you go home and write your first draft. And you, same process, you turn it in, they give you notes, you go home, you write your second draft, and then after the second draft, you turn it into Raphael, who does the third draft, and he's a genius, so he makes it good. And then we bring it to the table, and we have what's called a table read, where we bring all of the actors in, and they sit around, and we hear the script out loud for the very first time, played by our actors. It's such a fun day. And then they leave, and we all sit around the table with notes, and we go page by page, giving what we call punch-ups, which is beating the joke. You know, if there's a joke that we think we can do funnier, we will all try to outpitch each other. It's very fun. It's also great when you win. Or we trim and we cut it and we make it tighter. And then it's a locked script, and we go right to the record. And we get to sit in the record booths and have our individual actors record it, and we put together what's called a radio play. So Once we do that, then we send it and it's off to animation and they animate on top of the radio play. So I always was like, this might be the part where I lose you guys. I feel like I just like rattled that really, really plainly, like kind of seems really basic, but I have to say that that is the most demanding time for you as a writer. It's like exhausting. It is so creatively taxing. It's super intimidating. And all you can think about is getting it right. I feel like my poor husband, I would have to go home and we'd be sitting at dinner and he'd lose me and I'd be like, oh, Diane should wear a crown. Oh, we should say, it's so hard being Princess of Wales, what with all the whales. That's a funny joke. For me, I can never really turn off the clock when I'm working on my own episode. So, coming to the end of my presentation, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have, I want to leave you with a few writer's room tips. Should you ever get a job writing in a room? But to be honest, I do really feel like these tips kind of work in a bigger picture sense for just creating art. Number one, don't pitch twice. What I mean is, if you pitch a joke or a scene area or a direction for an episode, and the majority of the room doesn't go with it, and it doesn't get into the script, don't pitch it again. Trust us, we heard you the first time. It's not that we didn't hear you or that you didn't pitch it right. It just means that we were interested in other thoughts over yours. Lots of ideas are heard. Not every idea can get in. Only pitch the idea once, and we're going to yes and off the idea that goes in. It's very annoying when a writer is like, oh, what about the pops? We're like, stop with the popsicle. We're not going to do the popsicle thing. Two, this is my favorite note. Everybody, buckle up. Don't point out a problem unless you have a solution to that problem. It is the most annoying thing to hear a writer or a creative person say, I don't like this, we should do something else. And then have them not say something else. It is not helpful. It is the opposite yes and it is just the worst. Like, don't do it. If you see something is wrong and you know that, keep brainstorming a solution, and if you can't find a solution, perhaps that thing is right? But just even if you don't have it yet, don't even go, I'm so sorry, I don't have a solution to this, but I noticed this thing. Oh, it's the most annoying thing in the world, don't do it. 3, be nice. Don't insult other people, you guys. Don't be a jerk. Everyone, there used to be a time when being a jerk kind of was like funny and nuanced and neat and made you unique. And what happens on BoJack is you don't get asked back the next season if you're a jerk. It needs to be a comfortable place. It needs to be a place that you can be creative, and that all comes from respect. So, like, just don't be a jerk. And if you're a first-time writer, I already said this, but I'm going to repeat it because I think it's important. You may feel pressure to prove yourself worthy of the room. It's hard not to want to prove yourself when you have worked so hard this whole time to be noticed and to be unique and to be special and to be talented. But trust me, it's way better to be on the quiet side, to listen more, to only pitch when you really have a fully formulated thought that's helpful. It's okay to be quiet when you're new. There's a difference between being quiet and being lazy. You know what I mean? We have one of the quietest people on our show is a writer named Elijah Aaron. He wrote the Fish Underwater episode with Jordan Young. He's so quiet, and then when he opens his mouth, it is perfection, and it goes with the show. He is so thoughtful on when he's going to say something. It's almost frustrating because he always magically fixes it at the last minute. 5, have fun. I know I keep saying that, but know that being creative is a joyful, wonderful experience that not many people can do. It's hard, but at the end of the day, we get to tell cool stories, right? And aren't we so lucky to be able to do that? And last, if you are ever asked to speak at an animation conference in Buenos Aires, maybe work on your drawing skills and your Spanish, just a little. Thank you guys so much for having me, and I'm happy in these final minutes to take any questions that you guys may have.